Morning, Melinda. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you, Dean?
Very well, very well. Dean Boles here from Ontario. We've been working together for some time, 12 weeks in a row, or somewhere, or at least 10 weeks in a row here, Melinda.
Yeah.
Melinda Harrison, author of the Personal Next, also a former Olympian and executive coach. So we've been quite fortunate to have you share your experience, your insight, uh, and it's not just on all your research that you've done leading into your book, but it's real time. What I see is real time. Like you're very much uh, in real time of events that are taking place today, but also this pandemic, the whole how we should practice ourselves, how we put things into play, how we can uh, learn so much during this time about ourselves to make ourselves better for the future. So
Thank
anyways,
you.
looking forward to what we can talk about today.
Yeah, and along that lines, it's really important that we live in the present because we can't control what happened in the past,
Hmm.
and we can make choices for the future, but you can't do anything about the future. And, if I think about one of the key reasons that I wrote this book is for individuals to realize that life is a series of transitions.
Yeah.
And some of them are very big and some of them aren't very big. But every day we have an opportunity to keep evolving and keep doing things. And I think the practices allow that because they're active. There are
Hmm.
things that you can do every single day to help yourself get better and help others get better.
Yeah, and just to bring it, in your book, you focused in around an acronym called practices, and it represents 9 practices that are quite I would say useful, insightful, but does actually hit the mark on everything that we can even think of and be applied to.
Yeah, and that's where, that came out of the interviews. I
Yeah.
didn't make this up out of thin air. It was clear to me that, high performers use these practices to achieve. In many cases, the practices are absent when you go through transition. And then as you reemerge into a personal next, they start to show up again.
Yes.
So as we talked about, what I learned was that there were 9 practices. I'm not saying there's not 12 or there's not
Hmm.
15, um, but I believe there's at least 9.
Hmm.
And we use this slide as the example that the practices it's an acronym, but other words can be used for each of these 9 things. And so it's important to realize that your version of a word might be different than my version of a word. So just a quick summary as we go
Hmm.
through to get to the
Yeah.
last 3. um, Proficiency,
Yeah.
regulation, attitude, commitment, tuned in, identity. And today we're going to look at confidence, emotions, and secure base.
I find it just, you know, in our world of swimming and where we are right now, is trying to return to the pool, trying to get our foot in the door, trying to get faces in the water, and the challenges that are there still in front of us just because of the circumstances and a whole myriad of reasons. Uh, these are I would call it tenets that are going to really help us manage ourselves if we pay attention to them. But I just can't help but think how of all the unrest that's taking place in the world right now with and especially south of the border, but just with this pandemic and all the other unfortunate, unnecessary conditions. Maybe we can draw something from these last 3 uh, areas.
For sure. I certainly think the last 2, definitely, the emotions and the secure base. Confidence is that belief that you can complete a task or solve a problem. And it comes from within. Ed Podovinsky was one of my interviewees, and he made a really interesting point, that you can't fake belief. And it's such a great saying, because someone can tell you you should have confidence, but unless you know you have it within you, you don't have it. And so you can, going back to that idea of always wanting to get approval from your coach or recognition, you can say, yeah, I've got this. But deep inside, you may not have it. And so this is a case where vulnerability comes in, and owning the actual situation and being able to say to your coach, actually, I don't have it. I'm nervous. I'm unsure. And when a coach hears that, the coach can then walk through with this one. Well, let's review some of the things that you've done over the last 3 months that can potentially bring confidence, get you to believe in yourself, versus just ignoring it because the athlete is saying, I've got this. Because they want to have it, but deep inside they don't. So, going back to that question, it's almost like we want to step back and say to the athlete, tell me about how you're feeling about your confidence. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? What are things that you do that gain confidence, so that it comes not from the mouth of the coach, but from the mouth of the athlete. And if trust, which we will get to, the secure base is there, then the vulnerability can happen.
Yeah, and this is what, we always, we have to work at this every single day. There's no two ways about it. And the experiences that we'll get, the good, the bad, and different will help build that. I think it's, we talk about earning trust, but we have to earn our belief. We have to work at it. We have to earn it. That's what's, I think that's what sometimes separates, sometimes the ones who we see that are successful to the ones that we know that they have the ability, but just haven't acquired that full-on belief system or confidence piece. And it takes a tremendous amount of work from within, as you say. It has to come from within.
Right. And, this is the interesting thing about this, like what creates confidence. So if we think about our athletes returning back to the pool, if it were me, my confidence that I would start to be able to feel the water again, as I remember, I knew when I felt the water, I knew when I was ready. And so if it were me and I had done the work that I had committed to back when I wasn't in the water, the dryland work and all the other things that we were trying to work on during that time, that would give me confidence that I had the footings. Yeah. So I had to actually have that, I had to have the work behind me to know that I could do what I had been practiced doing, basically. But confidence also can come from the mental imagery. Mm-hmm. I was talking to a client the other day and saying, when I swam, I did this mental race rehearsal for 6 months every day. I practiced that mental race in my head. I had it on tape. And, I did, at that time, it wasn't called meditation, it was called deep relaxation. And I listened to it in that deep relaxation state. And so when I stood on the blocks at Olympic trials, I had raced that race so many times that I stood there and said, okay, I can do this. I know I have this in me. I've been here, I've raced the race. And I can only do my best. So I took away fear because I did the work, not only physical, but mental. And that allowed me to let my confidence shine through.
Hmm. And it took work. It took time. You had to set apart from all the physical activity that went into your performance. I think, as I understand it, and as I understand others, that's what it's the added the added value, the added time, the invisible training, we might call it.
Right.
You know,
Right. The commit, I mean, it goes back to building a proficiency,
yeah,
having regulation
yeah,
to
yeah,
do the work, understanding that at first you don't really get it. You have to grow in, have this attitude, I'm going to grow into it. You have to be committed to doing it. And you need to be tuned into yourself and have
yeah.
that. I mean, they all tie in together
Sure.
here. And so confidence comes from every single one of these other practices, in
That's
my
right.
belief.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other thoughts there?
No, I think it's just, if we could buy confidence, that would be wonderful, but there are no shortcuts, as we understand. And I do believe you have to earn it. You have to find your way. You have to, uh, you know, grab a hold of it. I go again that I think it's so important to journal. Athletes, I always suggest to them that they should journal in some way or another. Keep track of when things have gone well and when things haven't gone well, and really try and work on those things. That's sort of what I refer to, that invisible training, and
Right.
that's, there are no shortcuts. Uh, that's the bottom line.
Not for high performance,
No.
and there's going to be blips. And I
Yeah.
love what you said. I'm just going to reinforce that, to look at when things were going well, what did you do?
Hmm.
Because it's easy to look at other athletes and say, wow, they're doing that well, I'm going to replicate that. But it's very challenging because of the way the brain reacts to negative stimuli, to step back and say, what went well for me during
Hmm.
that time, during that performance, and to really make that a true assessment of what went well, because that will build confidence. But you have to fight the natural tendency of the brain to look for the negative.
Hmm. Hmm.
Excellent.
Mm.
Okay. Find my little cursor here. The next one is emotions. And this is different from regulation, where you have to regulation. I talk about emotions and making sure that you're controlling your emotions. This
Mhm.
is actually the ability to use your emotions to achieve the desired outcome. And in our era, the best in the world at this was Victor Davis.
Mhm. Exactly. Uh,
He controlled them under the regulation, along with other things he controlled, but he actually used them to achieve the desired outcome. I think of, in the business world, I think of Steve Jobs
yes.
as an unbelievable example of being able to control the emotions to get his message, to capture the audience. And I think of the world today, and you can step back and say, we need to control the emotions to get the message out there. We need to
Yes.
use our emotions to get the message out there, because a message needs to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think of this right now and the emotions, but with emotions, there's anxiety. Anxiety is part of the culprit in this. But as we're trying to return to sport, return to the pool, and we know that others are a bit ahead of us, and that's that's where we really have to check ourselves. And I think it really has to come from the coaches, to really manage themselves, try not to uh, create a somewhat of an anxiety that creates a bit of anger, because we know we don't operate very well when we have too much anger, because we don't understand the full picture of things. And so we have to keep our emotions in check. And in this particular case, getting back to the pool, the coaches have to be the large leader on this. And we as a provincial sport organization, we're going to do our part. Swimming Canada is doing their part, trying to pave the way, trying to find a good, secure manner to come back in a safe and responsible way that we can show. Because we know that pools for a myriad of reasons are not opening right now. Some of it's based on what they believe in. Some of it's based on capacity, just not able to reopen pools when it comes down to inspections. But they will become open. But at the same time, we have to be so responsible and so disciplined that these, keeping your emotions in check and having the confidence in what you have laid out as a plan, and for the athlete to have confidence that I'm going to be okay. I haven't swum for 12 weeks, but I'm going to be able to, my belief on this is that I believe the swimmers, when they do return in with their faces in the water, they're going to feel pretty good. They're going
Right.
to, maybe their physiology piece to the swimming, part may be a bit rusty, but I think from a technical point of view, I think their body is going to be that much stronger because they've addressed the areas that have not been addressed perhaps ever.
Right.
And I do believe that's a component that's going to take place. So, keeping the emotions in check, because it will, as you say, it will work towards to your desired outcomes.
Right. And so for coaches, really clearly articulating in writing, because it's going to force them to think different ways.
Mhm.
What is their desired outcome here? And I would even go deeper and say, what is their desired outcome for this week?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
for 2 weeks out, and then for 3 weeks out. So the first week, the emotions really might be supportive
Yeah.
and being able to put an environment of relaxation, and really trying to create something that is not necessarily typical outcomes in June.
Oh, yeah. Well,
So
I think we have to frame it. We have to have a reality check in a sense, and
right,
frame it from whatever took place before, pools were closed, to what they're going to be when they do open. And for a long period of time, things will be different, and we'll have to just develop and be creative and innovative in that. And we almost have to forget what we knew before as the routine, to creating a brand new routine that's going to have to be adaptable, be adjustable, nimble, flexible, all those things.
right, right. So if you had week one, what is the set of emotions? What is the feelings I want to create for my athletes?
Well, I think it's going to be excitement. There's going to be a lot of excitement. I think there's going to be anxiety because a lot of it will be they will be faced with a whole list of procedures
Right,
to go through. And so I think the communication part is going to be huge, the preparation part, even to the point of when you do get in the water, this is what we do because we can't have our normal interaction.
right,
We basically, you need to have the program before you come to the pool, and this is what we're going to do. So it's going to, we always encourage to see a lot more interaction going on between coach and athlete during a practice session, but some of that's going to be different. It's going to be
right.
done, sort of in the medium that we are right now through
Yeah,
Zoom. We'll have to continue those things because we can't do what we would really like to, but
right.
we just have to operate differently.
So going back, I'm going to push you back to the emotions part of this. So there will be excitement, but you want to control that excitement because you don't want somebody to jump in the pool and get injured right away.
Yeah.
So, it's realizing the outcome is not now. The desired outcome is next July. not now. And so, although there is going to be excitement, let's make sure that we check, how that's showing up with the athletes. Because that's how you're going to eventually get to your desired outcome. Recognize it, encourage it, but also control it so that you get your desired outcome long term.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes great sense. Yeah, great sense.
Yeah. And the same with anxiety. Recognize it. Talk about this theory I have about being anxious about being anxious. Coaches, can address not only the anxiety issue, but the anxiety about being anxious and why that might be. So again, that's another great emotion that over a Zoom call, they can have those conversations.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And that brings us actually to the last practice of the practices, and it's secure base. And this comes from, it actually comes from a psychologist way back. I cite him in my book. I can't think of what his name is right now, but George Colarossi is who works at the IMB school in Switzerland, I believe.
Yeah.
He's a professor there, and he really has coined this phrase as a secure base, and it is really the trusted place, object, or person or community that allows a level of vulnerability and can be called upon in times of need. And I think why we have secure bases, we don't talk about them enough. And this to me is, the S in the practices was, I was adamant about this, because this to me allows people to take risk. When you are in a practice and a coach tells you that he wants you to try something, and again, you don't believe necessarily you can, your confidence is waning on this particular set, but you trust the coach, then you'll take the risk to try it. Because if you fail, your coach is still there for you.
Yeah.
And being able to feel that secure base is so important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when you described that, I think back to the days I was coaching, and I would try and say to the swimmers, I would never have you do something I don't believe that you can't do.
Right.
And then the other one is, when it's all over, you'll still be able to go home and watch TV, no matter what. And just try to balance it out a little bit. And it's not complex, but it's always just trying to, push out those boundaries, push out the lines just a little bit, and discover it.
It also requires, which I know you were so great at because I witnessed it as you coached our daughter Annie. It's the ability to listen. A secure base isn't someone that's going to necessarily jump in and solve someone else's problem right away. A secure base is somebody that's going to sit back and listen and say, what actually do you need right now? In coaching, we call it, I'm going to meet the client where the client's at.
Okay.
Not necessarily where I want the client to be at. It's where the client is at. And so the coach being able to meet the swimmer where the swimmer's at and have that conversation and listen. And, we talked about it a little bit last week. When someone is having a bad practice, you can take two approaches. You can take the approach of, come on, push, 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 and they still aren't quite performing to the level. Or you can step back and say, is something else going on today that I don't know about? And would you like to talk about it?
Yeah.
That's a secure base, because we're not ignoring the underlying issue here. And that's hard when you have to get in 7,000 meters or whatever the distance is. It used to be 10,000 meters as I walk both ways to school in bare feet. 10,000 meters, when I was at Pinecrest.
And it was in deep snow when you were in London. So there
Oh,
you go.
absolutely. So, but you know, it's hard to pull a swimmer out and say, you know, do you want to share anything? And then not give advice on that share, but just to listen. And as I've said before, and I'll repeat again, one of those valuable pieces of advice I have ever gotten was from a psychologist that Jim and I were working with. And it was, is this a time that you want to solve the problem, or do you just want me to listen? And
Wow.
99% of the time, they really did not want you to solve their problem. They wanted us to listen to them so they could express their own sense of what was going on. If you interrupt them, you don't get to the deep problem.
Sure. Yeah.
So a secure base is hard. It's hard work to be a secure base because we want to fix things. We want to fix our athletes. We want to fix our swimmers. We want to fix our kids. We want to make it a little easier for them. But the reality is, in making it easier for them, we're actually harming them.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're not turning around and figuring it out themselves.
That's right. And I think the secure base piece is going to be quite valuable. Again, I come back to when we return, how we have to, and I think about your point a couple sessions ago, that about asking the question. I always felt that, you know, as you said, I was a pretty good listener, yes, but I'm not sure if I've asked enough questions to actually help get to the root sometimes. Sometimes I've listened enough, and where then I go, okay, well, I'm going to take this on, I'll start steering it in a certain direction.
Yeah.
But I do think the questions are quite valuable, and I think questions are going to be more part of our normal, just questions around their own basic health,
right?
Just things around them, because we're going into a period where we'll need to be quite honest. We'll have to be quite upfront,
right,
and to make sure things go as desired, as we want, as we need, or we really feel we need to do. So I think this is a value. When I look at this, I go, this is maybe, it could almost be a starting point in some ways, right?
Right. I haven't looked at this word backwards. Maybe I will. But,
yeah.
but no, I mean, it absolutely, you know, it's the foundation. It's the foundation of our relationship. And, you know, I love what you said. There's two things that I was thinking about as you were talking. The first one was about the questions, which I'm going to come back to. But the second one about being honest. Because you build that trust, the secure base can be honest.
Mm-hmm.
They can say, you know, the reality of the situation. And that's important too. A secure base isn't just there to be the support of the person. It's there to have conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one thing that I would recommend when you want to be honest, and I can tell you a funny story around this, but the one thing that is important is to ask permission.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
May I give you some feedback?
Yeah.
Because while the athlete might want feedback at that moment, they might not be ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they say no, you say, okay, come back to me when you're ready. They will come back. Ask permission to provide frank conversations. And we do this on the golf course all the time. This is the funny story. Jim and I, you know, when we're out playing golf and I'll notice something that he's doing and I'll say, can I share an observation?
Mm-hmm.
He'll go, no. And
not
then
right
later
now.
on that, so I don't, so later on that, it's like, okay, can I get your observation now? He doesn't
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
just
yeah.
kidding. But, it's in the moment. Sometimes you really don't want the observation.
True. It's true. I get that. I totally get that. In the moment, maybe it's not the time. But that's, and that was one of the things that, I've learned. I think through coaching, I always try to give feedback. There was sometimes immediate feedback, but there was always a time. The next day was the time. So if we had a great session in the water, and then the next morning was in the weight room or something of that nature, I would take the time to actually do a quick, a quick debrief of what I saw. I might have said, that was a good job last night or whatever, or in the moment. But then I would come back to it and says, this is what I liked. What do you think? Or something like that. Doing it away, almost taking the 24-hour rules we learn in other sports that, they instill the 24-hour rule about
Right.
after a game, parents or whatever can't talk to the coaches. I use that same 24-hour rule when I was, with my son as a teenager, before a teenager, and sometimes he was ahead of his time. But I really used the 24-hour rule on our relationship, just saying, okay, I'll come back to this. Yeah. And then we had a great conversation.
Right.
It's amazing, and it removes a lot of things that are not going to be necessary. That's for sure.
And that goes back to the emotions. Are you controlling your emotions to get the result you want? Because obviously most people want to just blurt out the feedback or blurt out their reactive response. And so being able to step back and say, not the right time, because my objective is to build this relationship with my son. And so I need to make sure I understand what emotions I'm using to get to that end result.
Mm-hmm.
So just a thing on the questions. Marilee Adams, who is a psychologist, I think I've mentioned this book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. She has this phrase called Q storming instead of brainstorming. And I went down to New Jersey, I got certified in her program, question thinking. And it really is about, instead of brainstorming ideas, brainstorming questions.
Mm-hmm.
And stepping back. And when you brainstorm questions, you're not allowed to answer them as you write them down. So the example that she gives when she starts out her training sessions is, when Germany, when the World War I ended, the questions that were being asked were, how can we punish Germany? The questions, and that created the footings for World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Had they turned around and asked the question, how can we bring Germany into the fold? That might have prevented World War II.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
And so being able to step back and make sure that, you ask all the questions. And so a great example, a great exercise to do, and you need a facilitator for this exercise, but is to really spend an hour to 2 hours on an issue, just asking questions around that issue. And then when you get 100, 200, 300 questions on the paper, then you scratch out the ones that are irrelevant. But you can't believe how deep you can go into solving a problem because you've asked the right questions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, when I think about that, I think that could mitigate quite a few of the things that we see today. There's no two ways about that if it had been done in a certain manner, such as that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful, Melinda. This is, seeing the full scale of it. I'm really glad that we broke it down into 3 parts, chunked it out. I think that's helpful, and seeing how they stitch together and intertwine. I think that's and it's all about process. We have to learn that we are a process-oriented beast in a sense, or at least the nature of the beast of what we do, and probably for everything. process. So this has been great.
Yeah. And is it day one or one day? Because
Is it the end of time, or is it a moment in time? It's
right,
not.
right. And so,
Yeah.
again, practices are ongoing,
Yeah.
never ending actions.
Yeah. And I think everything that, we've touched on over the series, I just keep thinking about, there's so many little valuable um, uh, tidbits here that, should be in their mesh bag as much
Right,
as anything, as their own little reminder in the moment. Could be in the moment, for reflection later on, any of that type of stuff. But it's got to be part of their equipment,
right.
equipment bag, their toolbox.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And it's not. It's something that you have to just keep evolving, keep developing, keep practicing,
right.
as you
Yeah,
uh, clearly shown and defined.
yeah.
So
And it's, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, it's my goal to have, we have our little cards that you and I have here
yeah,
that list them all.
there you go.
But
Yeah,
but I really believe that on the back of these cards should be the questions.
yeah,
And so that's, on my and then laminate them so that
yeah,
they can go in the mesh bag.
yeah.
That's, on my to-do list to do. Because
Well,
I
that
have
would
the
be.
questions. I just
Yeah,
haven't, sent it to Vistaprint yet.
yeah. One step at a time,
I know.
and managing all the curveballs that come along.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Well, thank
cool.
you very much, Melinda.
You're
Until the next
welcome.
time, be well, be safe, and we can't wait.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.